Welcome to our October version of the best or greatest of Blabbit. And we've had some great guests on, some great experts, and we just kind of like to talk about some of their points of view, how they really kind of intertwine with everything that we talk about here on Blabbit, whether it be presentation, public speaking, sales, or branding. I think we've been very fortunate to have some experts in the world on the show with us, and they've shared some, I think, some great little bits. What would you think, Paul?
Well, I'm going to quote David Crosby at Woodstock and say, should we tell them who we are?
No, that's a secret. Go ahead,
All
you
right,
start off.
I'll get started. For anybody joining for the first time, my name is Paul Geiger. I am a New York City public speaking coach and presentation expert. I work with individuals, organizations, and groups on making sure that their messaging, both internally and externally, is very clear, and making sure that they feel really good about delivering those messages with clarity. So we often talk about what is the message, does it resonate with you, and can you make it resonate with others? And we touch on a lot of different things in the various trainings that I do. Some of it's public speaking, some of it is personal branding, some of it is sales tips, as does my esteemed colleague. Take it, sir.
Hi, my name is Glen Ingram. I've been working in sales, sales coaching, sales training, branding, just basically everything to help promote, whether it be people or businesses. Seems like since birth, but we'll say for about 20, 25 years. So I'm always excited when I can share some information, some, again, bits or whatnot to help people when they're trying to communicate, trying to persuade, trying to maybe share a product with someone.
I like that word, persuasion.
Yes, we don't sell, we just offer solutions to people in a persuasive way.
Yeah, I mean, really, a lot of times people, the idea of being sold sounds like a dirty four-letter word. But being persuaded, and I think the only way you do that is by really being committed to the message that you're giving. So I agree that just about everything we do in business involves a level of persuasion.
Yes, I think it's being authentic, having a product or service that you believe in, being able to create a relationship, and then being able to convey that information clearly and concisely to that relationship that you've just created or that you've had for a while that you keep expanding upon.
Yeah, great. All right, so this is actually Blabbit's Greatest Bits Volume 1. So we haven't actually done a show like this. It's very unique. And usually when you do shows, the inaugural version of a show can often be fraught with technical difficulties, but we're going to really try to do this the right way. So I'm assuming I can share a screen.
Yes, sir, you can.
Excellent.
Okay. I think what would be a good one to start off with, it was, as we just spoke with briefly, is being authentic. And, Wendy was very gracious to share with our viewers just her perception of authenticity and how far that goes with people.
Well, I think communication is paramount with just about any subject, right? But I think that when it comes to the branding and the alignment with trust is, am I bringing my authentic self to all aspects of the communication process with others?
Yeah, I think if you're not authentic, if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't believe in what you're talking about, I think it comes through fairly quickly. And I think that's why a lot of times people that are out just focusing on selling instead of building relationships kind of come and go a little bit and don't have near the success as those who take the time to get to know the people they're talking to, and they can convey things in a way that they're, like I said, they're authentic to themselves and to their products or their services they're trying to distribute.
Right. Well, you know what? Let's dig in a little bit deeper into the whole idea of authenticity. We know that it is something that we want to be with other people. We know that that's something that other people want to perceive in us. And I believe that most people have an honest agenda, an honest objective. But as you and I have both seen in various years of training, is sometimes there are circumstances that sabotage that ability to really project that authenticity. And I find that one of the crucial things is knowing that you're on the spot and feeling nervous, which comes across as you being unsure of yourself. And I think that's the biggest detriment to what I refer to as somebody's authenticity quotient. Because really, authenticity is being committed to the words, but projecting that commitment. Because you know in your heart and soul, you really believe this, but I'm seeming a little uncertain because I'm feeling a little nervous because I'm speaking a little bit too quickly, or I'm just rattling on and on. I'm not giving the listeners an opportunity to process what it is that I'm saying. Of course, that's through my public speaking prism.
No, you're 100% right. I think the biggest thing is we have self-doubt, and we let that self-doubt creep in. The one thing that I've tried to share with salespeople over the years is 9 times out of 10, you're going to know your product or your service better than your client. So have some faith. And if that 1 time out of 10, they ask a question, they throw you a curveball, don't be afraid to say, you know what, that's a great question. Can I get back to you on that one? Let me ask one of my experts here so that I can give you the exact answer. Because I've said this many times before, I've never had anyone upset at the fact that I wanted to get them the exact answer instead of just trying to throw something out there that I did not believe in or didn't know was 100% true.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let me share my memorable tip from episode 5 with Wendy Fraser. And the thing that I picked out was her perspective on how you change, how you go about making the necessary changes.
If I'm just being asked to make some adjustments, I can do this. If we think that they're asking us to change, somehow that trips up our ego, thinking, well, you're asking me to do something that's not me. I'm not being my authentic self.
And that goes back to the idea of, well, how do you go about making these changes? Because it seems like if you make adjustments to be more authentic, it's not really territory that I'm familiar with. Therefore, it's going to erode a little bit of that sense of comfort, confidence, and authenticity, right?
Well, and coming from someone that's worked for some large companies, if it ever your managers, your supervisors are asking you to do this, to really not be your true self, you may want to question if you're at the right place. Because a good manager, a good supervisor is going to want to share with you how to sell, how to promote what they're doing here, but they shouldn't ask you to compromise your beliefs or your authenticity, whatever you want to call it, just to promote a product. I've been there and done that, and that's some of the reasons why I'm not there anymore. When you actually have someone, when you say, this is the right thing to do, this is the best way to do this, how do we do this? If they don't share those beliefs, you're probably not the right place.
And you know, another point about training is exactly what Wendy was saying about, yes, change sounds like a huge thing that we're doing, but making those little adjustments really is tied to why training often takes quite a while, because you're making adjustments to behavior slowly but surely. As much as we want the changes to happen tomorrow, because you have a big presentation or you have a sales quota that you have to meet by the end of the month, you will make small adjustments, small steps toward those or toward that goal or those goals. And it will take some time. I know we all want things very, very quickly, but our behavior in the way that we do things, which is not necessarily detrimental, it's just not, often it's not ideal. So those small adjustments lead to those bigger changes.
Well, and for some of us that aren't new into the workforce, it's taken a while to get to where we are right now. Sometimes it takes a while to change that. And it's extremely difficult if you're trying to do it on your own and you don't have a mentor or a coach to kind of talk to you, whether it's to being able to relax and get something negative out of your head before starting to talk with somebody, to scream, jump around, do whatever you want, whether it's learning how to breathe a little bit better to slow down your pace of speech.
Hmm.
There are a lot of little bitty techniques, little bitty bits that really go into making someone a better presenter and a better speaker.
And you know what? Let's talk for a moment about making adjustments, making changes in terms of personal branding. Now,
Mhm.
it sounds like you make a big change, you make a big overhaul, but I know, as well as you do, Glenn, that making those small adjustments, learning a little bit along the way. I have been going through this process all my life, just like the rest of us, learning how to navigate things. And when it comes to personal brand, it is something that is built up in the eyes and in the perception of your audience over time by small adjustments. You do have to make the commitment to making the change, but don't be overwhelmed by wanting the change or the sense of change being such a big adjustment that I have to give up doing this.
And again, when you're looking at a brand, it's the perception that may have to change, not you and what you're actually doing. Because I may be saying something that makes sense in my head, but if it doesn't convey to everyone else out there, those are some of the changes as far as execution or presentation that may make a huge difference. Because if what I'm saying isn't coming through to you, then my brand isn't coming through to you. You're not seeing the authenticity of the way I'm trying to convey it. So a lot of times when we help people change brands, it's not changing what they're presenting, it's how they're presenting it.
Right, right. All right. I know we promised we'd be doing greatest
Sorry.
bits, and I'm sure that we could talk about each one of our esteemed experts that we've had week after week for probably an entire show. We don't always say these things in front of them because we don't want to embarrass them with how impressed we are, but we could talk about it now. But I want to put a little bit of a guide rail on that, and if you don't mind, Glenn, would love to move on to episode 6. That was Bonnie Davis.
Yes, I think Bonnie had something that was really important.
It's really important that we're intentional about finding the things that refuel our energy. And some of that we need to do on our own, be really intentional about taking vacation, taking time off, setting boundaries in our day, especially now when many of us are working at home.
I think for a few things. Work is a four-letter word. And if you don't let it, if you aren't careful, the grind will get to you. So there are a lot of little things you can do when you're passionate and putting a lot of effort in what you're doing, as far as, like she was saying, scheduling a vacation, scheduling time off. As Paul knows, I don't typically work past noon on a Friday. I haven't done that in about 20 years. But I
Mhm.
start Sunday afternoon preparing for my week, and I put in quite a few hours Monday through Thursday. And we plan little trips that my wife and I do away on weekends and stuff like that, at least once a month. So again, I'm working, 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 and I'm taking a break. I'm working, 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 and taking a break. And I think with doing that, it kind of balances out and gives you a little bit of peace of mind.
And I absolutely agree with that, Glenn. And my approach is to not let any single day overwhelm me in terms of being intentional. And I try to organize things so it doesn't back up all into one day or doesn't become one huge deadline. And this is something, I used to pride myself on being the 11th hour hero. And eh, that that can work when you have the resilience of an 18-year-old. But I think that it falls under the umbrella of self-help. You have to be intentional for yourself. And that's really what I got obviously from what Bonnie was saying.
Yeah, and if you're working in a sales environment, if you're working anything with a deadline environment, I've always been of the approach of rushing out the gate and coasting across the finish line. Because I've seen people that did the opposite and they were so stressed out at the end. I thought, if you just would have worked a little bit hard at the beginning, this doesn't have to be that difficult.
Right, right. Let me ask you something. And there's a lot of varying opinions about this. And I know we've been talking more and more about virtual presenting. And when you go on a Zoom call, it seems that for everyone, obviously, we are either sitting in our home office, which is doubling as an extra room now with all of the circumstances that we've all landed in, or some are transitioning into office space, but because of what's going on, there's obviously a lot of virtual presenting, a lot of Zoom calls. Do you find that the Zoom calls require as much energy and as much focus as the one-on-one meetings that you've experienced in your career?
I'm always kind of a weird person, Paul. So as you know, sometimes asking me those questions aren't the best. I treat it as the same. I mean, I'm going to be prepared for a meeting. I'm going to have all my stuff ready. The only difference is just being comfortable to switch a gear, maybe pull something up, take a look at something if someone asks a question you don't know. But I look at meetings. I love Zoom as opposed to a telephone because I can see Paul. I can see when Paul's going like this. I can see when his eyes are starting to close and I'm losing him a little bit. So I look at this as being the next best thing to being there.
Yeah, no, and in my experience, it's not easier because you're on Zoom. It's just not. You might be in a comfortable space. You might not have gotten out of your commute 60 minutes before going into that meeting, as might have been the case. Certainly was the case in my experience, commuting into New York City. Now I don't do that. And yes, I benefit from not having as long a commute. But it's interesting. You would think it would be a lot easier, but it's not. You have to put out the same sort of energy, the same sort of focus when you're on Zoom. It's a little bit different because the camera is always on. So in the old instance of being a contributor, let's say at a meeting with several individuals, when that person is talking, the focus is going over there. But what's interesting about being on Zoom is your camera never leaves your face. And that awareness can be a little draining as well.
Well, and one thing that if we're had a meeting at someone's office or somewhere out external, we probably have our cell phone either left in the car or in a briefcase. We don't have our email turned on. And the one thing that I notice a lot, and I find myself doing this from time to time, and I really focus on if I'm going to have some meetings back to back, is shutting off the email, shutting off any type of notifications on your computer, putting that cell phone somewhere else so that you don't have the distractions that you wouldn't have in a typical face-to-face meeting.
Mm-hmm. Now, distractions are one thing, but I want to segue right into my memorable tip from Bonnie's episode of Blabbit. And that is something that she brought up about negativity. Now, we've all experienced it. Some people immerse themselves in it more than others, but what she had to say was really pretty interesting.
We all have this thing called negative self-talk. We're programmed for negativity. It's our survival. It's neuroscience. Back in the caveman days, if we were under attack, we had to look for negativity to survive.
I know the extent of the conversation was back in the caveman days, and we started joking about how, I can always blame anything that's negative or anything that goes in that direction on my caveman DNA, which, by the way, all of our Blabbit listeners can use that as well. I guess all the guys, because we like to believe that we still have some caveman in us. But as far as that negativity to survive, I think what she means is don't think that everything don't take the time to prepare, to consider outcomes and inevitabilities. What do you think, Glenn?
100%. Again, whether it be a presentation online, whether it be someone talking to a client, whether it be a salesperson, if I had a nickel for every time someone said, what if, I'd have quite a few nickels, because I think you're always going to think about all the possibilities, all the things that could come up that could be not anything but positive. And sometimes if you do that, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But 9 times out of 10, those things never happen. But again, I think it's our innate ability to bring up, have fear, and think about things that could go wrong, which you always want to be prepared. But if you spend hours thinking about what could go wrong, very often you're taking up time thinking about what could be or what could go right.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And really, when you find yourself on the spot, in the spotlight, what I would refer to as public speaking, because all business communication is a form of public speaking because the stakes are so high. One of those forces that gets triggered is that fear of consequences. And often it is a sense of letting yourself down, of just not living up to primarily your expectations, but also the expectations of the various people that you work with or the various people that you report to. So good preparation across the board is great. It's a great thing to have in your back pocket and know what to happen when the spiral can begin to occur. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. There's a lot of tripwires that are inherent in public speaking as well as virtual presenting that can make us, I guess, fear the silence, which is often a trigger. You know, it's like, whoop, dead air, as we used to say in the radio days, but it's still true. But I love to embrace the silence. I think that people pay more attention to what comes right after the silence than they do to nonstop chatter.
Yeah, anything you can do to, you know, I guess get away from the monotony. Even if you're up there talking in front of someone for too long, you know, again, you can always take a break, do something to then, you know, create some excitement, interject some humor, just something to change the pace, to keep things moving in different directions, typically keeps attention better than just doing the same monotone thing over and over and over again.
Right, because people are watching. They really are.
You know, that's a great segue into our conversation with Peter that we had. And we were talking about the fact that sometimes people that are in management positions don't realize that they're always on stage.
As we're looking at it in relation to Zoom, of like we've got people on cameras and they're staring at each other, it really highlights a reality that has always existed for leaders. And it's the fact that a leader is always on stage.
And I think the epitome of that is some of the humor that some of us have seen back in February, March, when all this started, when someone would have their laptop walking around and all of a sudden, next thing you know, they may be in a restroom because everyone's watching all the time when you're on one of these presentations.
There have been quite a few parodies like that. But, you know, I take that as just being evidence of and supporting my statement that all business communication is public speaking. And certainly the people that you are trying to persuade, whether they are customers, whether they are partners, they are coworkers, they're direct reports, they're watching the confidence, the authenticity, the commitment with which you speak. So it's not always knowing the right thing to say and be worrying about always saying the right thing, but it is a matter of having the confidence in delivering whatever that message may be. And I had a client several years ago who gave me a great statement that I think applies to how we present ourselves to the people that we work with, really how we present ourselves to the world. And that is, I may not always be right, but I'm never in doubt.
Yeah.
But and that doesn't apply, obviously with most generalizations, it doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean be arrogant or boastful, but believe in yourself is the way I take it.
And I think it's comes more naturally to some people than others. Trust me, as a father with 23-year-old daughters, and maybe being the more confident one in the family between my wife and myself, I can't tell you how many times she was frustrated when the girls were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and she would say something and say, "Oh yeah," and they'd rattle something off, and she'd say, "Really?" They're like, "No, I don't have a clue, Mom," and she'd say, "Quit acting like your father. Just because you're confident doesn't mean it's accurate." And I'm being a little bit, over the top with it, but yes, I think anytime you can come across as more confident in knowing what you're talking about, it's always going to be easier for some people to kind of follow those people. I mean, there are some people that are born to kind of lead, be a little bit more um, boisterous, vocal, magnanimous, whatever you want to call it. And but I think anyone can still learn some of those traits as well. What do you think, Paul?
Well, without a doubt, I think that it's something that we all can perfect. I know that if you, another one of my favorite quotes is, in business, there is no status quo. You're either moving forward or you're moving backward. So in terms of your training, you always want to be improving, becoming a better leader, becoming a better manager, becoming a better coworker. And really, that's what Peter's episode was really about, and really what his consultancy is all about, which is leadership, and um, and really how you come across to people and influencing people.
We are trying to influence the behaviors and actions of others in a direction that we believe is going to benefit them personally.
One thing that kind of brings me to a lot of thought about what Peter said in Peter's book and whatnot is, we spend a lot of time and we focus on our children going through high school, going through college, and getting this foundation. And in my experience, those who have really developed and continued in their life and really moved in an upward projection are ones that didn't stop learning. They use that as a foundation and they continue to learn, continue to perfect their skills, their knowledge, and really be students of life.
Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting. I know the continuance of that conversation really brought us to a place of talking about influencing, and obviously a term that a lot of people understand or hear often in regard to social media is being an influencer. So your personal brand, how that comes across, you want that clarity so that you can influence people, because really personal brand is about what are you known for, not so much what you're known as. And this really is the distinction between a leader is known as the leader of a corporation or of a group or of a team. But there can be leaders, you can be known for your leadership, but not actually have the title of being a leader. And really, anyone who is using their personal brand to influence is being known for being a leader.
100%. And I can't tell you how many times over the years, whether it be myself or someone else that maybe didn't have that leadership title, but they took the time to learn A, B, C, or D, and they were the go-to person in that community, in that organization, in that local area for information for how to do one or the other thing, maybe even more, well, definitely more than even people that were above them that should have been the leaders.
Right, right. And I know some people very readily take on the responsibility of being a leader, but a leader does have influence. And I think most of us, we do want to have an impact. We do want the things that we do, the things that we believe in, to have an impact on others. And the only way to do that is to be able to share those ideas in a way that is consistent. So, personal
100%.
brand, you know, influencing, it all kind of melds together.
And it may sound contradictory when you talk about influence, but being that resource, being someone willing to help others and give to others,
Yes.
creates a position. And when you're that person that's willing to help, willing to give more, I believe it always comes back more in the back, on the backside, for when you're just helping and using basically the law of reciprocity.
Yeah, and it's really not just a matter of you getting the job done. You know, in terms of influence, that definitely spills into company culture, into just culture in general, and being able to uh, speak to people and get your ideas across, so that that influence is felt.
Well, and I'm going to give you a real quick example here. Probably 12 or 15 years ago, the company I was working at was just getting new into digital media and this new media stuff. And I helped one of the coworkers go and talk to one of their clients and helped them actually get a sale. Didn't do anything for me, but I was helping them because they were trying to learn something. And by talking to that business owner 10 or 12 years ago, and every few years we have talked for one reason or another, met at different places, just contacted me this week, asking me to help them with something on their next adventure, their next thing they're doing. And again, it was just from me being there, being the person that was a resource. I actually referred somebody to them a few months ago for what they're doing. So just by keeping, I guess, in communication, just being a decent person sometimes does pay off.
Yeah, and I know it sounds cliche, but there's an enormous amount of power in how can I help?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of phrases that resonate with people, I think that brings us to episode 8, which
Yes.
was with those
Sales.
of
It was
you.
a sales presentation.
It was simply because it was with Antonio Garrido, who is a wonderful public speaker. He's a wonderful sales trainer. He's a leadership and executive coach. And he knows how to turn a phrase.
Yes.
So,
And from working with salespeople for the better half, like I said, the last quarter of a century, he made a statement that I have stolen. I told him I was going to steal, and I use on a weekly
yep.
basis.
Typically, the buyer wants to say, okay, show me what you've got. Tell me how to do this. Tell me how to do that. And we call that kind of unpaid consulting, where the salesperson shows up and throws up and just gives them everything and hope that they fall in love with them.
Yes. Do not show up and throw up. So what's that mean? That means a lot of times someone as a buyer is going to want to get you in and out of there as quickly as possible. And sometimes salespeople then have the propensity just to show up and throw up, in Anthony's words, and just blurt out everything that they have to offer. And inevitably, all they're doing is throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, instead of taking the time to take charge of the presentation, the meeting, the interview, whatever you want to call it, finding out what the purchaser or the buyer really wants and or needs, and then providing a solution, instead of just telling them and blurting out everything and being the person that talks for 80-90% of the entire presentation. Because in my experience, maybe 10% of the time will that ever develop into anything productive.
Right. So it's not a matter of just, this is a good idea, this is a good idea. And I know it sounds a little contradictory to some of the things we've already said here in this episode, which is believe, be consistent, get it across. But one of the tenets of Antonio's approach and of your approach, and certainly of mine, is asking questions. Because we've been programmed all of our lives to answer questions. Who knows how much 2 + 2 is? Oh, 4. Oh, yay, that was great. You answered the question. But asking questions is how you really get that information. Now, you might think if I'm asking questions, it sounds like I don't know, but that's not true. You are supposed to have done your due diligence and know your product really well, know yourself, know your ideas that you're trying to promote, whatever it is that you're trying to persuade someone to take a look at. But you still have to ask the questions.
Well, yes, because even if you know your product, your service, your sales, whatever you're doing, you still don't know everything about the person sitting on the other side of the desk and what they're looking for, what trials they're having, what issues they're dealing with. Because in my opinion and my experience, once we're done with asking those questions, learning more about what Paul is doing, what Paul wants, what Paul needs, then I can say, based on what you said here, Paul, I recommend this because this will do A, B, or C, or this will help in X, Y, and Z. So you're not selling your product, you're positioning your product as a solution to what Paul needs.
Right. And you know, I know this is a theme that we've heard through quite a few of the episodes of Blabbit from the experts that we've been talking to. And I even said it earlier in this broadcast, which is don't be afraid of the silence. When you ask a question, there is going to be some silence. You have to be okay with that. And I know often the knee-jerk reaction to show up and throw up is, I just want to fill in all the silence. That's all. As long as I'm talking, I'm in charge. But guess what? Whoever is asking the questions is actually in charge of that meeting, of what is going on. You are giving the other person lots of room to speak. So you would think that they're taking control of the situation, but they're not. The person who's asking the question does have the leverage, and you need to learn a couple things about them.
Well, and sometimes there's different places and different ways of using silence. So if Paul just asked me a question, and if I blurt it out, then I just wasn't really listening to Paul. If Paul asked me a question and I pause for a moment and I think about it, now my response is thoughtful and caring, and the whole scope, the whole process of this meeting changes direction just by using some silence, using some time to think, using some time to convey authenticity.
Yeah. And just going back to the basics, the public speaking basics of what are the techniques that you're using. You bring up a really good technique, which is you're pausing. Now, how do you pause? Well, there are a couple of things you can do. You don't want to just stop and take a pause like that. But if you, and this is one of the pillars of what I teach and what I train, which is if you take a deep breath and gesture along with it, it really seems like you're thinking about it. And whatever comes next, whether it's a question, it's truly an important question. It's truly a question that you you're requesting to get the answer to. Well, that sounds pretty authentic to me.
And then, especially when we're talking about a sales presentation, then towards the end, when I said, well, Paul, based on all this, this is what I recommend to get started. Whatever type of sales approach you're going to use, whether it's a assumptive sales close, a definite sales close, different things like this. And then as the presenter, as someone selling something, you stop talking, because it's the golden rule of sales. As the next person that speaks after the offer's been extended, typically is the first person to, let's say, lose or lose a little bit more as the negotiation continues.
Yeah. And you know what? That's an interesting segue into my choice for memorable tip with Antonio Garrido. And I gotta say, through all of these episodes, it has not been easy to take out what the memorable tip is, but just as we've decided the format would be one each, though I know you've got tons for all of our experts, as do I, but we just sort of cherry picked them, which, by the way, gives us an opportunity to go back and pick other tips down the road. Mm-hmm. We're going to have so many other episodes, but these are just, it's great expert advice. let me go to my tip from
Perfect.
Antonio.
If I'm speaking on a stage, I want to get them to a point. If I am talking to somebody in an important conversation, I want to try and get them to a point. If I'm trying to sell to somebody, I want to get them to a point.
Really, what you're talking about is you want to get them to a point. And going back to the idea of asking questions, again, feels like you're relinquishing some control. But you have to be okay with them not saying yes to you. And as Antonio said in your choice of clip, not really liking you so much that they're going to say yes. That's not it. You have to be okay with the questions leading to potentially an answer of no,
Mhm. Well,
which gives you clarity, right?
and I would always rather have no than maybe, because then you can move on. But the one thing to keep in mind with this is no two meetings, presentations like this run the same, because you always have different personalities involved. So as you're getting to the point, sometimes you may be waltzing to that point. Sometimes you may be doing the two-step. Sometimes you might be not dancing at all. But you have to be confident enough in yourself, have enough organization, and be prepared for whatever goes down the road to go off on a tangent and then bring them back into the meeting. And because you're going to go off into another tangent and then bring them back. So it's just, I guess, learning a little bit more about and being able to read your person across the table again, across the desk, and just understanding that not everything is going to go perfect. They rarely go the way you plan them, but just be confident and get to where you're wanting to go with just a finish line. We may go different routes, but we want to get to the same point and get to the finish line.
Right. And that silence is giving whoever you're speaking with in a sales call, or whoever you're speaking to when you're public speaking, or really when you're speaking to your audience using personal branding, that silence is giving them room to think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is important as well when it comes to social media content and personal branding. I often like to intersperse questions that I would ask of somebody who might be interested in the things that I am known for, and get them to be thinking along the same lines, whatever that might be, posing it not so much as, well, I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this. Well, that's being consistent with your brand. But once you know who you are and what you're known for, how about asking a question that gets the person thinking in that direction? I think that that's an important thing too. In other words, assuming that somebody who's interested in the things that you are would have a similar point of view, and using, the old Jerry Seinfeld approach. Have you ever noticed? Have you ever thought? Those sorts of questions, I think, raise the level of engagement, right?
100%. I always think it's good to go into any type of presentation like that with, 8 or 10 questions that you want to ask that are maybe generic. But then again, if you've done a little bit of research, you can ask a question, or as you're having interaction between the two of us, you know what, that was a great comment, Paul. Have you thought about this? And taking the comment that Paul just made and moving it into a different direction, opening it more of an open-ended question versus a closed-end question, and just kind of finding ways to, again, uncover more information, get another layer of that onion off.
I agree. All right. We're doing pretty well. Here, covering a lot of the greatest, most memorable, in our opinions, most memorable tips that we've gotten from experts over the last couple of weeks. That brings us to episode 9.
Yes, and you were just mentioning a little bit about social media and stuff like this, and I think Isabella had a great comment about a digital footprint.
Legacy lives through the other people that we affected, touched, or impact. So that is what's such a beautiful thing what you guys are doing also with all this digital footprint and everything that you creating. That is the value that you disseminate, and you never know what the range and reach it is right now when it's a great global platform.
Let's give you 2 examples of this. I had one referral yesterday actually to a young actor who has investments in a business in California. And I have a meeting after this with a huge property management company in California. And because they were both referred to me from me doing online presentations in the last year about a specialty that we offer. And this person talked to that person and said, yes, I heard Glenn speaking about this. This is who you need to talk to. So by having content online, by having this digital footprint, you never know who you're going to come in contact with. But having something out there definitely gives you the opportunity to be contacted, or if you don't, I wouldn't have been contacted by either of these people this week.
Right. So it sounds to me like you're saying, be willing
Well,
to participate, be willing to engage.
well, it's all part of, I think, the branding of establishing yourself as an expert, as a specialist in whatever field that you're doing something in. The more you share information, the more you try and put information out there in the world, the more availability it is for someone to find you, learn about you, or know about you when they're looking for and needing help with your service or your product.
Yeah, and I agree. You know, it may seem like it's an over-flooded market out there for people who are known for doing the same things that you do. But I think trying to be all things to all people is a recipe for disaster. You have to really hone in on what it is that you have to offer. What's your best? What's the best thing that you have to offer? Because inevitably you're going to see everything through that lens, and people are going to see you through that lens. And it's not going to require too much soul searching to figure out what you're known for, as long as you embrace that.
100%. And as I mentioned before, I worked for one large company that did one thing for a long time very well. And then as that product started to diminish, they tried to go in different directions. And inevitably, the different directions they went in, I don't know that they did any very well. And I constantly am talking to people out there, business owners, that are looking at all these different software platforms that are coming out. We've had a barrage of platforms come out in the last couple of years. And just as you mentioned, they may offer 4, 6, 8, or 10 different things, but inevitably they do 1 or 2 well, and the others, not so well.
Yep. Good. All right. We're getting near the end, and I do want to pull in my memorable tip from Isabella's episode. The one that I grabbed is timely in terms of the circumstances that we all find ourselves in.
Obviously, we have on top of the fears also uncomfortable, forceful change, a lot of anxiety, because a lot of people felt like we don't have control of so many things.
I like her use of the word forceful change, which brings me to a place I know that I've experienced in this tumultuous year of 2020, the need to make some adjustments. And not everything that I did was the perfect choice or got me to my destination right away, but they all sort of guided me in the right direction, as long as I was leading with, again, the theme for this episode, and probably many of them, is that authenticity. Be upfront with people, communicate that we are all going through this together. Nobody has all of the answers. I think that's one of the reasons why we do this Blabbit every week, is you know what you know, Glenn, I know what I know, but oh my God, the experts that we talk to, they have similar yet very varied perspectives, very varied experiences. And being open to collaborating with people who are known for other things, I think is really a good way to go about navigating these at times difficult days that we have, and the ones ahead.
100%. And if you saw, we had a comment from John, who is on our shows from time to time, watching and listening. And he said, this reminds him of an Oscar Wilde quote: "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken."
Ah, I like that one, John.
Definitely. Yes, I hope this is helpful. Anyone that's seeing this now or in a recording, every Friday morning at noon Eastern, Paul and I come on, and it's either Paul and myself, or often we have expert guests, like we just shared some tidbits with you from them, that we want to talk about, again, those three pillars that we talk about: public speaking, sales/presentation, and then personal branding, just to help people out there that need a little bit of help, whether it be personally or for their business, to be able to convey, communicate, and just grow personally and professionally.